Hello and welcome to Arcadesa 2021. I'm Hazlin Shaharuddin from University Technology Mara, Malaysia. Thank you for joining us in this auspicious celebration of creativity at the 5th International Symposium on Art, Craft and Design in Southeast Asia, Arcadesa 2021. Today, we all have gathered here to unite thought, ideas, and grow our bond here at Arcadesa stage. I'm delighted to inform everyone that this is our 5th Arcadesa stage, and this year around Faculty of Art and Design, University Technology Mara, Malaysia, and now it is now known by a new name as a College of Creative Arts. And again, on behalf of College, we are incredibly proud to host the 5th International Symposium on Art, Craft and Design in Southeast Asia. For a few past seasons, that world was tried by the COVID-19, and it has been a real test of resilience in creative industry. As much as we've been compressed by COVID-19 restriction, it doesn't end our precious stage. We stand together and strike back with a burst of digital symposium. Honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, this international symposium is the outcome of creative collaboration between the College of Creative Art in Malaysia, the Indonesian Art Institute in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and Silpakorn University in Thailand. The goals of this stage are the activating the collaborative activity of several institutions as a catalyst for the success of the creative industry among Southeast Asia countries. It's provide a platform for the community of artists, designers, and researchers to discuss issues related to art, craft, and design in the era of Creative Industry 4.0. And it's also provide a platform for a community of artists, designers, and researchers to showcase their research results, innovations, and creative works that have potential for the development of creative industry. There are many webinars that were held throughout this webinars that were held throughout this international symposium for championing sustainability through virtual clothing in AI and VR to exploring the uniqueness and fundamental of Kufi calligraphy in contemporary art, which can empower local cultural heritage and preservation. We believe that it is important to speak on topics and have open discussion on the relevant subjects that affect the art, craft, design landscape so that we will be better equipped on how we can forge our path as fellow creative now and in the future. With that being said, I would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone who has participated in this symposium. The International Symposium is the result of a creative collaboration between the Faculty of Art and Design, which is College of Creative Art, University Technology Mara, Malaysia, together with the Indonesia Art Institute Yogyakarta, Indonesia, and Silpakorn University, Thailand. And now joining us today to share their thought and knowledge, Mr. Hassan Muthalet and Dr. Jane Lee. Without further ado, I will pass this stage to our moderator, Elena Azami. Please welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Hazlin. Hello and welcome to the final day of the 5th International Symposium on Arts, Crafts and Design in Southeast Asia, Arcadesa 2021. This is the first session of the day. My name is Elena Azmi from the College of Creative Arts, formerly known as the Faculty of Art and Design, here at University Technology Mara, UiTM, Malaysia. I will be your moderator for this session. Ladies and gentlemen, in making sure that our Arcadesa stages continued during the pandemic, the Digital Symposium was initiated for us to promote the sharing of views, ideas, and also to strengthen our relationships amongst the Southeast Asian countries. Before we begin our session with our special guest, I would like to remind everyone here today that if you have any questions, please type them into the comment box below. We will present these questions to our guests later on during our Q&A session. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to have him with us today, a living legend within the film industry, the father of animation in Malaysia, Mr. Hassan Muthalet. Mr. Hassan is currently a writer, a film critic, and a Malaysian film historian. Born in Kedah, he received his education and grew up in Penang. Entirely self-taught, he has had a career spanning more than half a century, beginning in the private sector in 1964. Today, he is recognized as the father of Malaysian animation, an Asian animation pioneer, and has an honorary master's awarded by UiTM. He began as a commercial artist and window displayman and was also into professional still photography. He then joined Film Negara as a graphics designer, where he had the opportunity to go into cinematography and visual effects. He soon became well known for his animation work, including the Sangkancho series, which are still popular today. In between, he animated TV commercials for many popular brands and many countries. He became the first to animate characters for the cinema, as well as directing Malaysia's first animated feature film, Silat Legenda. His foray into live action directing garnered him many awards. His first documentary won an award in Jakarta. He has also had some acting experience in films, TV dramas, documentaries, a music video, and short films. He has been invited to lecture and present many papers on film and animation in Malaysia and overseas. Many of his papers and articles have been published in Malaysia and internationally. He has authored 3 books and is currently writing his 4th. It is about the history of Film Negara, where he worked for 26 years. Without further ado, please welcome Mr. Hassan Muthalet with his talk titled Storyteller of the Digital Age, Mamat Khalid and His Legacy for Young People, the Industry, Society, and Academia. Welcome, Hassan.
Thank you very much. Hello.
Hello and good morning.
Hang on, my cat is getting in the way. Okay. Thank you for inviting me to deliver the keynote address on the late Mamat Khalid. It's an honor for me and a pleasure to talk about a good friend who had a dream to contribute and bring changes to Malaysian film storytelling and the industry players, while also maintaining a Malaysian identity and all the values and traditions that Malays were once known for and were proud of. Mamat saw himself like the Penglipo Lara of old, who, while entertaining the ordinary man, also imparted words of advice that could make his life worth living. Mamat was a filmmaker. I think we can now go to the slide. Slide number 2. So Mamat was a filmmaker who portrayed everything that was Malay. And his references were all that are in the Malay world and Malay cosmology. It even surfaced in his greeting cards every year. He was a man who had a dream, a man of destiny who was thankful to have been placed in the entertainment industry at a certain time. Like the samurai whose sword was his life, Mamat had made films his life's work. The famous Japanese director Akira Kurosawa once said that there is nothing that says more about its creator than the work itself. And in Mamat Khalid's works, we see the creator, his worldview, and his hopes for a better society. The same hope was expressed by Kurosawa when he posed the question about his own subject matter. Why can't people be happier together? So, what do the films of Mamat have to say about his society, his community, his country, and above all, the dreams that he had? So Mamat, just like Tan Sri P. Ramlee, had references from many different sources for his films. In his very first film, Lang Buana, Mamat referred to Kurosawa and his most famous film, The Seven Samurai. In Lang Buana, Mamat had scenes of Malay samurai in a battle scene. It's scenes like this in many of Mamat's films that had actually made him seem frivolous. In Malay parlance, he was merapu. Consequently, he was looked upon as a director not worth paying attention to. But those who are discerning enough would have seen that the samurai scene in the context of the story was a parody about some Malaysians who had studied film overseas, but when they returned, they tried to impose a foreign way of thinking and an alien style into Malaysian cinema. It was, of course, criticism with a grin, without hurting anyone else's feeling. It was much the same approach that P. Ramlee had taken. P. Ramlee too had been influenced by Kurosawa, and it can be seen in his first two films. Mamat, in turn, had also been influenced by the style of P. Ramlee's storytelling. If you have these two great artists as your reference, how could you go wrong? I see a lot of relevance in many of the wise words of Kurosawa that reflect Mamat Khalid's ways of thinking and his philosophy of life. I will refer to some of Kurosawa's words in this context. So, slide 4, taking Kurosawa's comment about dreams, I must say Mamat Khalid did dream hard. Every one of his films had the same theme. He appears to have desired for other filmmakers to follow in his footsteps, which was to extol all that is Malay and have all manner of Malaysian ethnicities being depicted in local cinema. Mamat wanted them to be like the Malays and people of old who were honest, hardworking, truthful, well-mannered, and who avoided wrongdoing. Their word was their bond. They were close to their land, being a community that was cohesive and who came together in both good and bad times. Mamat's dream was to tell stories of the common man, using actors who were not commercial draws, but who had the talent. He even took a famous rock star and turned him into a simple, bumbling village boy. He had zombies, the undead, and portrayed them as being very human and lovable. He had a female ghost that wasn't scary, but was just one who loved to scare people. And she was a Malaysian ghost that scared the pants of two Siamese medicine men in one of the Kat Lima films. You can't be more nationalistic than that. Subtlety, your name is Mamat Khalid. In the 2 decades of his career and through the almost 40 feature films and TV dramas that he has done, Mamat has endeavored to bring his dreams into reality through fantasy. Slide 5, please. I first came to know Mamat personally when he called me on the phone and introduced himself. I had written an article for the local newspapers after a film reviewer had maligned Man Laksa, saying it was a comedy that was out of date. I corrected him, saying that it was not a comedy, but a parody of the state of the local film industry. On the phone, Mamat thanked me and said that even if only one person understood his films, it would be enough for him. I think it was in gratitude for that he made use of my portrait, next slide, and my name in a few of his films. It is perhaps the first time that someone had appeared in films without actually appearing in it. Next slide. Many filmmakers make films about themselves and about their involvement in a career that they themselves have chosen, even if they may never achieve success. Kurosawa has mentioned the same about himself, perhaps hinting at the fact that he himself has not been accepted in his own country, and perhaps also hinting that his very famous film Rashomon is not about human ego, but is actually about film. But that is another story. Next slide. For me, a good film is one that entertains. It has something to say and reflects the culture or identity of a people or nation. A film works well when the audience can relate to the characters, next slide, locations, and situations in a film. Through the casting, costumes, behavior, and action, the audience can very easily follow Mamat's stories. Much of the dialogue is humorous and has gone into the collective memory of the Malaysian audience. The film characters that Kurosawa describes, slide 10, fits in very well with the kind of characters that Mamat has designed for his films, specifically in the Kampung Pisang and Kat Lima series of films and a few others. That is, of very ordinary people living their lives honestly and making the most of their lives. These are the people who are the real heroes. It is how Mamat portrays his characters of people who are the soul of the nation. Next slide. There's no specific hero in Mamat's stories. Everyone is a hero in his own way. It is how Mamat sees his community and what he aspires them to be. Everyone, even the village idiot, has a role to play. It is a reference to the primordial and the archetypal. Life is a film script that has to be played out according to the roles set out for them. In the words of Shakespeare, the world is a stage, men and women merely players, having exits and entrances, and one man in his time plays many parts. Mamat gave opportunities to many young graduates of film to work with him as creatives, crew, and as actors, and in the process, guiding them and discovering who was best suited for what role. Almost all of his actors are not well-known names. They are not those who usually get interviewed or are written about by the media. Neither do they have 1 million followers on Twitter or Facebook. Even the ordinary people that Mamat chose as extras proved that they had what it takes to be actors. Slide 12. Even when he appropriated characters from outside Malaysia, for example, zombies, they became Malaysian zombies. They even say Assalamualaikum. And when he utilizes Japanese manga characters, as in Apocalypse X, it is a satire about Malay leaders who have literally discarded their culture and have become the devil incarnate in their lust for power. Slide 13. Apocalypse X was the only film where he graphically expressed his disgust at the political scenario in the country. At the end of the film, his prediction for the country has come true today. The evil leader does not die, but is reincarnated and returns to power. Next. Mamat accepts the fact that young people are very impressionable. In the words of the philosopher Socrates, the young go about as if they are intoxicated. But Mamat also sees them as being very innocent, and they do have a wawasan or vision. It is adults and politicians who manipulate and misguide them. George Lucas in American Graffiti and Mike Nichols in The Graduate had already alluded to this sometime in the 1970s. This is another theme that runs throughout Mamat's films, specifically in Zombie Kilang Biskut, Apocalypse X, Amir dan Lokman, and in the Rock Quadrilogy. In Apocalypse X and Rock O, Mamat begins his story with a little girl. It is to symbolize the innocence and naivete of his young characters. They do not commit any crime or are into bribery or corruption, but yet they are condemned and maligned. All because of what they stand for is not politically correct. Even when there are references to corruption in the country, it is very oblique. For example, a rocker says, "God can destroy the nation, you know." It is obviously a reference to corruption. And another line, "If the submarine cannot submerge, turn it into a chicken coop." An obvious reference to a certain incident involving submarines. And the having of a wawasan runs throughout the rock films. Unfortunately, the rocker's dreams are not achieved. Next. The rock theme is split apart due to the machinations of those around them, like TV stations, the media, managers, and the establishment. Next. In Amir and Lokman, the dream of two young men to start a cafe by the sea is also dashed, and they end up dead through no fault of their own. Only their ghosts stand and look at the sea helplessly at the end of the film. The subtext of the story points to a certain political party that has been recruiting young people for their own nefarious ends. It is a subtle warning by Mamat for young people to be careful of such people. Next. In Apocalypse X, Mamat depicts the young people who are already in the clutches of those hungry for power as being very progressive and wanting to do things in a more positive way, but it is denied to them. And so, Mamat offers a solution. He makes a call to look back at old Malay traditions. that in traditional society, there has always been the benign sage, one who will appear like Moses to lead men out of the quagmire that they are in, meaning that in today's chaotic times, we need to look to the past for the solution. I make mention in my title, that Mamat is a storyteller in the digital age, but almost all his films appear to be set in the past with no sign of handphones, computers, or such like. The look of his films, through the casting, setting, art direction, costuming, and props, speak of a time that is past. It is a stark contrast to the present day, a so-called progressive digital world. As such, it is a subtle comment on today's men and milieu who, instead of embracing the past, have totally broken with it. Oaths and promises are not kept. A man's word is no longer his bond. Traders cheat their customers. Corporate figures and politicians are into bribery and corruption. The environment is ravished by unscrupulous developers. There is misuse of power, and religious figures can no longer be trusted. Mamat's film form is clear. It is also similar to the way Yasmin Ahmad designed her films, as if the milieu were in the 1950s, when life and human beings were so much simpler and kinder. Next. Perhaps, as Kurosawa has said, the imagination for their stories and the look of their films, next, come from the power of their memories, of a time that is long gone, but was one that they had actually lived through. Next. And in the case of Mamat, who had been a rocker, it is a memory that is full of grief and despair. Next. He contrasts the mundane life and boring job of a young man in the film Rock. Next slide. As compared to the excitement he had felt before as a rocker. Mamat is one of a very few directors who are into art and design, music, literature, and world cinema. Next slide, please. A close scrutiny of his films will reveal the applications of these disciplines in his film, and also the many references to the history and culture of the country and its cinema, of famous paintings, and to world cinema. Slide 22. There are references to European cinema of Wim Wenders' Wings of Desire in Apocalypse Acts, and to the paintings of Caravaggio, the master of light, who has inspired artists and cinematographers around the world. Slide 23. There are also shots that are very close to paintings, but most of the meticulous work that Mamat has put in will go over the heads of those not familiar with these references. In Manap Karaoke, he had Manap appearing before his paying audience like the Bangsawan master of ceremonies of old. Next slide. It is good that in today's art and design classes, the study of film is included. It is the newest art, but one that is appropriated from every other art. Today, in the teaching of art history, one cannot avoid references to cinema and its history. The study of film cannot avoid the references to art history and movements. The director, production designer, art director, cinematographer, and colorist need to be cognizant of this fact, as Kurosawa has remarked, that in films, painting and literature, theater and music come together, but a film is still a film. Slide 24. Mamat was a strong advocate of multiculturalism. We see the various ethnicities appearing in meaningful roles and not as comedy relief as it was once done. It is not only about them being Malaysians. There is also the marketing aspect. All of them are the audiences for his films. Slide 25. He celebrates the presence of minorities. There are transgenders, the effeminate, and even foreign workers from Bangladesh. Slide 26. Even the Orang Asli are not left out. Neither are the Nasyid groups or elderly men from the local surau. There is even an Iban girl from Sarawak in a lead role. Slide 27. Mamat's dabbling in the supernatural has its references in the Malay world and also in the worlds of the other ethnicities. There are Malay, Chinese, and Indian ghosts who interact with each other, in a sense saying, if ghosts can come together, why can't humans? Mamat does not practice discrimination on the screen or even in his life. Slide 28. And in Mamat's world, the devil and his minions are also considered as human. They have their likes and dislikes and can even dance and crack jokes. Here, Mamat practices reverse psychology. Unknown even to the characters themselves and the audience, the devils preach religion. Slide 29. The Bunyan and their invisible world is known to all Malays. Mamat designed a very believable world for them in his film, complete with dancing damsels in white. In between, it became a parody of a university that teaches the arts and also of a well-known personality known for her strange attire. Mamat is clearly respectful of these supernatural beings. He gave the headman a yellow costume, a signifier of spirituality or higher status. Slide 30. Gentle fun was poked at Finas in Zombie Kampung Pisang. The post on the table represents the national monument. It signified the unnecessary involvement of the agency in also making feature films, the so-called patriotic films. Such these should actually have been given to the private sector. Slide 31. In Zombie Kilang Biskut, Mamat criticized the way film was being taught at a local university and of how students were being forced to follow the unintelligent methods being practiced there. The song Yale Yale being sung by the students signified the frivolous nature of the teachings there. And Awi, who is leading the students in the song down the corridor, keeps throwing up his hands in the air, lamenting at the shenanigans at this particular place. Slide 32. I would like to close by looking at an interesting and unusual segment from Mamat Khalid's film Estate. There is an outdoor film screening in the estate. Only the character played by the Indian actor Shashi Tharan reacts to the chariot transporting an idol in the background. It reminds me of the words of the famous Russian filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, who said that religion is very close to cinema, as both aspire to a higher objective. And even our famous film director Uwe Haji Shari has said that cinema is spiritual. I think in this context, we can consider Mamat as a thinking filmmaker, as one of those who calls others to do good, as is enjoined in the Quran. It is not necessarily relegated to the religious preachers. Mamat does not have to be a religious preacher to do all that. He has done this through all his films. By associating the religious chariot with the cinema screen and with Shashi wearing a yellow shirt, Mamat is saying that only very few people can truly understand what film is all about. This is the most unusual sequence in the history of Malaysian cinema. You may have realized by now that Mamat Khalid was no ordinary filmmaker and that he was an observer and a thinker. His films are patterned and organized and are worthy of study in their narrative and narration, even up to the academic level. For design students, there is a trove of knowledge embedded in his films and which should be analyzed. I hope there will be something like a Mamat Khalid chair in UiTM, in the design faculty, that will look seriously at his films, as well as other films by directors such as Uwe, Haji Shari, Din Said, Namron, Yasuk Tanaka, and many more. More writing on film is needed, and this chair could be the impetus in that direction. Slide 32. For Tarkovsky, his film and his films are one and the same, like the samurai and his sword. I don't think it is any different from Mamat's beliefs about life, about film, about his society and his community. And it will not be any different from that of any passionate filmmaker. Mamat Khalid is no more with us, but I'm sure he will be happy wherever he is if he knows that people will finally look at his films with new, discerning eyes. And at his art hub in Tanjung Malim, you can see how he has turned it into a rest house, that he has turned into something that is very, very unusual, almost like a film set. And he has held many book launches, poetry readings, music sessions, including rock, and had other people, he had many people even from the universities to come and share their knowledge with the ordinary person as well as filmmakers. So in 2018, when I received the Merdeka Award, I hosted a dinner at the Art Hub, where I think for the first time, many different filmmakers and people in the arts and in the animation industry met for the first time and mixed around and talked among themselves. So it is a place that is worthy of a visit, especially for students, to look at the many posters from the early days, from the 1934, when the first Malay film was done, until the present day. He has posters adorning the walls, and he also has many art artifacts and paintings, and there are many drawings of him made by many artists and cartoonists that are worthy to be looked upon as art. So I conclude my talk. My apologies for any discrepancies, and I would like to say thank you to UITM for inviting me again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for an eye-opening talk on the storyteller of the digital age, Mamat Khalid, and his legacy for the young people, industry, society, and academia. To summarize, Mamat Khalid stands out as a preeminent teraju utama, also known as a director, who continues the storytelling tradition as practiced by the Penglipu Lara of bygone times. His characters are ordinary folk who become extraordinary, given a uniquely parodic treatment crafted by Mamat, wherein he inserts subtle criticism of society and about the film industry he is a part of. As a true Malaysian, he includes all ethnicities, including Iban, Orang Asli, and etc. Also, foregrounding non-Malay issues on the way, as Yasmin Ahmad used to do. Mamat shows his compassion as a human being by depicting positive images of rockers, gangsters, transgenders, and even ghosts and zombies. In his production design, his understanding of art and cinema history is seen in meaningful visuals that complement the narrative. Because of the thought, the intricate design and subtext that goes into them, the films of Mamat Khalid are worthy of academic study. Now, we have entered the Q&A part of the session. I would like to take this opportunity to ask Mr. Hassan a few questions. The first question is, when watching Mamat Khalid's body of work, you are made aware of the fact that you are actually watching a film and not observing life unravel on screen. This seems to be a conscious part of him. Why do you think that this kind of consciousness is important for him?
Well, I like all of his films, and there are a few that actually stand out. And one of them, I think, is Amir dan Lokman Pergi ke Laut. I like it because of his stylistics, the way he directed and put the story onto the screen. And he had a very good cinematographer working with him. Tan Tek Z was trained in Italy. And you can see the references to the Hollywood films or the film noir, and he shows now neo noir, beautifully lit, and of course, it is the way he had visualized. And the music by Luka Koncevic, I think it's from Europe, also really fitted in, and we could be transported back into the films of the 1940s of Hollywood. And I would say this is a film that is worthy of study by film and design students. And the second part of your question?
Why do you think the consciousness of being the kind of not observing life unraveled on screen, it seems to be a conscious part of him. Why do you think that this kind of consciousness is important for him?
Well, when you make a film, there are actually two stories. One story is the one that you're watching. We call that the foreground story. But the background story, which is hidden, we say tersirat, is the one that is actually interesting, and that is what I look for. Now, Mamat Khalid was very conscious of what he is doing. And when he makes a criticism, he does not do it directly, the same way that our famous Piramli did. He did not point fingers at people. He just pointed. He used indexes. In semiotics, the second level of signification is indexes. It's like I'm pointing, but you will not be looking at my finger. You'll be looking at where I'm pointing. That's how he does it. And he's very sure about what he does. And sometimes it is so subtle that even I myself cannot see it until maybe in a second or third viewing.
All right, thank you for that explaining for that question. So the next question we have is, as we live in a technology advancement era, what do you feel is missing in the entertainment industry today, or in general film industry?
Well, that's a very big question. I don't think I can really answer that because there are so many sides to it. But I would say that if our education system was like the time of the British in which I was, where we had literary and debating societies, where we actually study literature, and then we stage plays, and then we even have debating sessions. And I would say that even Tun Dr. Mahathir, when he took over as a Prime Minister in 1981, he also set out for government departments to have debating sessions. This was to create thinking people. So from there, we need, and I think this is where FINAS can play a very important role to in film appreciation, and in a sense, to do informal education. Have our audiences to be informally educated, and we need TV shows. I remember at one time, Mansur Puteh spoke about film on RTM, but after that, we never saw anything else. So the TV station can play a very important role in creating a film literate audience, not to go too deeply inside, but to appreciate how the director and his team worked so hard in putting their stories onto the screen. So it is not just narrative that they need to understand, but also narration, which is technique. And I think if this can be done, then all the graduates in film, in design, in communication, and mass communication, and so on, when they come out, they will have an audience. So as more and more young people are taking up film, animation, multimedia, and so on, they need this scenario in the film industry. Otherwise, they will lose their audience. And another thing that FINAS can play a role here is to bring the Chinese filmmakers, Indian filmmakers, and Malay filmmakers together, not just segmenting them as Chinese, Malay, and Indian, but as Malaysian filmmakers. Then we have a bigger audience. And I think this is one of the lemons of our very good filmmakers, that they don't really have an audience from all segments of society. And I would say, and I'm being a bit negative here, I would say that if 10% of our film industry people went to see local films, I'm sure all our films would make money. So it is a very sad situation.
I see. Going back to what you said earlier on the hidden meaning of films, we feel like nowadays local films these days lack depth and nuance. It's like we crave for those films that has more hidden meanings. How can this new generation of filmmakers improve on that?
Hmm. So recently I did a webinar on film language. Uh, I'm sorry to say that I would say that almost 95% of our filmmakers do not understand film language. They understand film grammar, that is long shot, medium shot, eye level, above eye level, and things like that. That is the very basic unit in filmmaking and in cinematography. But when all this come together during editing, we see something coming out, the language of cinema. So even in art, you have the visual language. For instance, the use of symbolism. If you show sky a lot in your film, it means the theme of your story has got something to do with God, spirituality, and so on. If you have stars in the sky, it means you're talking about destiny, the destiny of the hero or whatever. And if water keeps appearing all the time, like in Majid Majidi's films, it is about talking about the characters who are of pure heart. Because we use, and when I asked Majid Majidi, he told me, yes, we use water to clean ourselves. It was not a great philosophy. He just took something which is something that we do every day. And then, if you have a shot, first time you introduce a person on the screen, it will be the main character of the story. Okay? But if you introduce the character from the back, that means he is the bad guy. Why? Because we cannot see his face. And we are always uneasy. Whenever, if we talk to someone, we cannot see his face. And if the person is wearing dark glasses, or his one side of his face is dark, one side is bright, all these elements, these visual elements, tell us that this is the bad guy, or there's something very negative about this person. And if you want to know whether a person in the hospital or someone who had an accident or is sick is going to die, how does the director foreshadow it? He will be shot either upside down, or we will be looking down upon him as if looking into a grave. But if the person is going to live, it will be taken by the side and so on. Now, these are actually conventions in the visual language, which almost all directors know. Most of the directors do not understand the theory behind it, but they would do it instinctively. And that's how Piramli did it. All his films are full of these hidden meanings. And he is not interested in whether you understand it or not. For example, in the film Pendeka Bujang Lapuk, there is a scene where Aziz Hatta is stealing money. And suddenly the camera crosses the line and we see now the sky behind him. It means God is looking at him and God doesn't like it because he's a good guy, not a bad guy like the ferry workers who also were stealing money. And the conclusion to that scene is after they have crossed the river and Aziz Hatta looks for the money, there is a hole in the pocket. That means God has played a role and he does not want Aziz to bring haram money when to go and meet this old man where they are going to learn spiritual knowledge. So there is no book in the world that actually tells you about all of this. So whenever I talk about this, people look at me very strangely, wondering where I got all of this from. I got it from the university in the cinema. For 40 years, I've been watching movies and noting things in the dark, and I saw the same thing being recycled, whether the film is from Iran, from Russia, from China, or from Hollywood. They are all using the same visual language. And Carl Jung, the psychologist, said it is the collective unconscious that we are all taking from. For us, we will say it is God who is giving it.
I see. Thank you for such a great explanation on that. So another question is, how does the symbolism in films influence Mamat Khalid's films?
Well, actually, it did not influence him. He knew it instinctively. But I remember there was one time that he called me and wanted to confirm something, which is he asked me, if someone is standing in front of a mirror and we see him and his reflection, does it mean that he has a psychological problem? I say, yes, that's how filmmakers do all over the world. In Malay culture, if somebody looks at you and then they see another person, like a lembaga, it means that you have a khadam. That means you are making use of a supernatural being. So you see, it's not something that was created by Hollywood or by the West. It was there from the very beginning in mythology, in religion, and people just put things together and speak using all these symbols. So Mamat did not actually study in detail, but as he was making, I think it is firasat. In my book on film, I mentioned firasat that P. Ramlee used. So firasat, there are two aspects to it. One is seeing some indications in life. For instance, in the West, they say when a black cat crosses your path, you are going to have bad luck. Don't walk under a ladder because it will be bad luck. If a mirror breaks, it's going to be bad luck. Things like that. So that is the physical aspect of it. But the other firasat is something that you feel without even thinking. That suddenly you get this inspiration that tells you something wrong. There's something wrong here, or there's something going to happen to this particular person, and so on. So P. Ramlee had both of this.
I see. All right. Thank you so much. So the next question is, how can the next generation of filmmakers tackle this not problem, but is there any young generation of filmmakers that can bring impact to our society using film?
All right. So I and my colleagues like Uwe, Namron, and everybody, we are always helping to bring helping and supporting young filmmakers because they will take over from us. So it is our duty to help them. But I must say that I am disappointed at some of the films made by young filmmakers today. They do not seem to understand the film language because they have not learned it in their faculties. And why have they not learned it? Their lecturers, I think, also do not know. Maybe some know, but they cannot impart everything. But I think it's time that instead of talking about the young people, we should talk about training the trainers. They should be people who must go back to school, learn the basics again, and then go into detail about the film language. We have to do this before it's too late. Otherwise, our films cannot make it in international film festivals. I have been on many international film festivals all over the world. And whenever there are three of us, and whenever we choose three films to be considered, it is almost the same films. And when we choose the final, it is exactly the film that all of us saw as being the best. Why? One, we want to know what is the story. Number two, how has the story been presented on the screen through the medium of cinema? And then we will ask, so what is the director actually saying? And if our filmmakers cannot describe this in one short sentence of what their film is all about, then they themselves don't understand what they're doing. So I don't want to mention the names of films, but too bad. Don't talk about going to the Oscars. You can't make it there because there is a lot of giving of gifts, blah, 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 and so on, and you have to spend a lot of money. So forget about the Oscars. Go for international film festivals like the Tokyo Film Festival, Jogja, NetPac, and if you can make it to Indian festivals, film festival in India, you are already great. Why? Because your filmmaking is of very, very high standard, and especially in Calcutta, where I was on the jury, and I saw that the people were lining up for hours to buy tickets. They are really crazy about film.
Wow, that's such an interesting insight on what it can be done. In your opinion, would you like to tell us about how Korean films their effect on our film industry, and why do you think it has been such a big impact in society now?
Sorry, I didn't get your word career.
No, Korean films.
Oh, Korean films. Okay. I don't think Korean films are having an
Yes.
impact on us. It depends on what kind of films you are watching all the time. If you just watch Korean films, then you will say, yes, they are really, really very well done. And I can say there was one TV series called Vincenzo, which was almost like a film. I was so riveted. It is because they have good writers. This is what we are very much lacking. And why is it that we are lacking? Because we are not emphasizing the study of literature in schools. Okay. Now, the literature has got to be world literature. Unfortunately, when a certain someone took over a ministry's portfolio, he chucked out English literature, replaced it with Malay literature. Malay literature is not yet world literature, but English literature is. And I would say that our students have to read a lot of books. I used to read one book a day when I was in school. And I failed my Form 5 examinations because I never read school books. I only read storybooks. But I received a distinction in English. And that is what has helped me all these years in my, in my writing, in the writing scripts for my films, because I had no formal study. So very important that the English language should be paramount. And then, of course, you can learn other languages. Now, today, I would say that not only Korean films are really, really well made, but films from all over the world, like India and Indonesia, they are breaking a lot of taboos, which we seem to have a problem. We get censored left and right. You can't do this, you can't do that, and then all these religious people jump on you saying this and that. And I remember in one Malaysia Film Festival jury, instead of judging the film as a film, they became moralistic, saying that such films should not be made. If the censorship board has already approved the film, who are you to judge the film in that manner? You just look at it as a film, So let us look at all these films from all over the world, and then look at ourselves and see where have we gone wrong. We are now very much behind compared to our neighbors like Philippines, Thailand, Vietnam even, and Indonesia.
All right. So, talking about there's a new question. Of all of Mamat Khalid's work, which is your favorite and why?
Well, I think I already mentioned this. Is Amir dan Lokman.
All right. Regarding back to what you said about Malaysians film censorship, I'm guessing that the censorship we have in Malaysia is a huge hindrance in our film industry for us to go forward. Why do you think that Malaysia does not want to lift those restrictions on the censorship so that we can do more films more on those harder topics, those taboo topics?
I would not say that censorship is a hindrance. You need censorship. Every country has it, but it's how you apply it. But I must say that our censorship board has also been very benign. They invite filmmakers to come and talk to them about the kind of thing that they're going to put on and how they can overcome it. For instance, you cannot show someone being stabbed with a knife. Okay, you cannot see the knife entering the body, so you can allude to it. For instance, the knife is raised, and then you cut to the shadow of the knife striking someone, like in the film Psycho. Imagine, there was 60, 70 years ago, in the shower scene, the knife never entered the body, but because of the way it was edited, everyone thought that they saw the knife going into the body. Now, you see, you are using the art of editing to do that. And in Lelaki Harapan Dunia, Liu Seng Tat showed the scene of the camel being slaughtered. He didn't actually show the camel's neck being cut. He just showed to the crowd who were standing there, and suddenly they bring out umbrellas, and then we see the blood splashing. So that's one way of avoiding all this violence. And even like punching and so on, do not be too graphic. So I would say that young people are very impressionable. It goes into their subconscious mind, and even very, very young kids from a very young age, all these things go into their subconscious without them realizing it. So therefore, we got to be very careful as filmmakers. We have to have a moral stand. Do not show sex and so on. Why? Because religion forbids many, many things, and even Malay culture at one time. I remember that when Datuk Lat went to Los Angeles, he was asked, they did a storyboard where the father kissed the wife before going out in front of the children. And he said, no, 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 we do not do this in Malaysia. So they were very surprised. So where does he does it? Where does he do it? He said, either behind the door or in the room. And you know what they said? What kind of country are you living in? So you see, we have to cater to the different cultures of a particular country. And that is what semiotics is all about. You cannot show icons, indexes, and symbols the same for all countries. Like the color red, for China is prosperity. For the West, and even for us, for many countries, it is danger. In Malay culture, I think it means bravery or courage. So we have to be very careful.
Yeah.
Cakap je.
Okay, so actually we have some network error. So when we waiting for our moderator, so I think I can come out with a last question to Pak Hassan, which is from Nur Alina. Why do you think Malay dramas keep repeating the same narrative? Do you think we like good filmmakers, or they just more focused on what already works and just capitalize on that for profit only?
Okay, for a long time, people have been complaining about our local TV dramas. Again and again, it's about a dato wanting to marry another woman, and so on. I remember in the 70s and the early 80s, RTM had many, many good dramas that were almost like feature films. In fact, they were better than the feature films at that time. This is because Tan Sri Johan Jaafar was writing under his pseudonym Jaafar Khan, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And his constant director was the late Abdullah Zainal. Now, both these people are very much into literature, into theater, into history, into music. And so the product that they produce is very different. I can give you a scene from a drama called Al-Infitar. And I was so surprised because at that time, I was just beginning to learn film language, and I was surprised that in a TV drama, it was there. And when I spoke in University Malaya, I was invited by the late Dr. Anwar Noarai to speak on Rahim Razali's films, which I'm sorry to say was very much lacking in film language. I said I can only talk about TV dramas, and one of them is Al-Infitar, where politicians come to see an old man, a very respected old man, in his house because they wanted him to speak at a political campaign. How did the director show this? He had the politician sitting cross-legged on the floor while the master was sitting on a chair. In Malay culture, that is already very wrong. And he's reading a book while they are talking. That is another thing that is wrong. Now, what does this scene mean? So you had to wait for the mise-en-scène of another scene later. Now, the master is not wearing a shirt, and he hears the voice of two young kids. They call him, Ato, Ato, can you tell us the stories of the prophets? And he comes down, and even though he's coughing, he's not well, he brings them up into his house, sits together with them on the floor, and tells them the story of the prophets. So you can see the binary opposition of how it was treated, that he knew what the politicians were up to, that they were actually not sincere, but the kids were very sincere. This is how you speak. Now, if our writers do not understand this aspect, not teaching the director of how to shoot, but indicating certain things, then we are dead. So this is the kind of drama that we get. They are mostly doing it for the money because they are being paid very low. Some people even get 500 ringgit for writing. Why? They need to survive. So we don't have a very good ecosystem for our filmmakers to make better films. But at the same time, of course, there are people who do not care about this. As long as they have a job making films, they don't care whether the film reflects our identity, culture, and so on. So for TV stations, I'm sorry to say that some of them are telling filmmakers of which actor to put in because he has 1 million followers, 2 million followers, and so on. This is ridiculous. So I think these people have all lost their way. They are not broadcasters. Real broadcasters, during the time of RTM in the early days, we can see they knew what kind of programs to do for the public. But today, you have accountants, you have lawyers, and all kinds of jokers working at TV stations and deciding on what sells and what doesn't sell.
All right, so we have one final question. Why is that that I noticed that when we watch TV Malay dramas or Malay films, the music that they incorporate to the film somehow does not match the narrative of the scene or the narrative of the story? Why is that?
Well, it's back to whether you have the knowledge or not. So let me tell you about some of my friends in the industry. I know them from 40, 50 years ago. Now, if 40 years ago, they did not really understand the theories behind film and how to tell a story on the screen together with music and so on. Today, when I talk to them, they are at the same level as they were in the 40s. They never took the trouble to learn or upgrade themselves or mix with people who are more intelligent or go to international film festivals. So you see, music in film is very, very important, but the producer does not give much importance and gives a very low budget. So how can you actually compose? So you have to use library music. So you can see maybe some of the music we have heard before. But I can tell you that in the hands of a very good editor and music director, the way they use instruments, you don't have to have an orchestra. It could be just some piano notes, the way Yasmin had been using. And I can tell you of another beautiful example in the film Ola Bola, done by my friend Chiu Keng Guan, who was a graduate of the Beijing Film Academy, where they actually learn about philosophy and music. Now, in the final kick, at the end of the film, our players are running into the stadium. The camera follows them in slow motion, and the music comes on. Now, when I was watching it in the cinema, for some reason, I wanted to get up. So I didn't know why. But when I interviewed the film composer, On San, he told me that the director told him to take one bar from Negaraku and insert it into the movie. Now, that was the reason why I wanted to get up. It was subconscious. So you see, he knew how to create a feeling of patriotism in us. And that's how he did it. These things are not in books. It comes from the thinking of the filmmaker. And the filmmaker is someone who does not know how to compose, does not know how to operate the camera, and so on. But he knows more than them of how the visuals and the music can enhance the narrative. So if you have, I think Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has already said it 1,600 years ago. He said that do not trust someone to do something if he has not got knowledge about it. So we see this happening everywhere, not only in filmmaking, in politics especially now.
Mm-hmm. All right. So thank you so much for answering that very insightful question about the music in the film industry. So we have now come to an end of the session of the day of the 5th International Symposium on Arts, Crafts and Design in Southeast Asia, Arcadesa 2021. Once again, we are honored to have Mr. Hassan Muthalet in the final day of Arcadesa 2021, and we greatly appreciate your very significant contribution. Thank you to everyone who has joined this session. I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the respected lecturers, dearest friends from Indonesian Art Institute, ISI, Yogyakarta, Indonesia, Silpakorn University, Thailand, and University Technology Mara, UiTM, Malaysia. Come up soon, don't miss out on the second session of today, the final day of the 5th International Symposium on Arts, Crafts and Design in Southeast Asia, Arcadesa 2021, later on at 11:10 a.m. Do follow us on Arcadesa 5 on our official Instagram and Facebook page. I'm Elena Azmi, and until then, stay safe and take care. We hope to see you soon.